Hi everyone, it's Martin from Garden Gnome Support and welcome to this webinar looking at variables and logic blocks. Now we're going to start off fairly basic and then ramp up as it goes on. Now this is going to be part one, and as we go on, perhaps we'll get asked some questions, and that's probably going to generate for part two. I've got ideas for parts two already, just by this project alone. Anyway, before we go any further, just a little bit of housekeeping. As you can see from the screenshot, if you want to answer any or ask any questions, we've got the Q&A tab. Just type them in there. Okay, here it is. I've also we'll also be joined by Karen later on when we do the Q&As at the end. If you're asking questions, please stay on topic, because obviously these videos are being recorded, so we want the questions to match the topics. And when we do call for the Q&As at the end, that's when we're going to be stopping taking questions because of the X amount of second delay. Right, okay, that just about covers the housekeeping bit. This is the project that we're going to be looking at. Now if I open it up, you can see we've got a bit of a fancy hotspot. We've also got a pop-up image that when we hover over or when we pan to a certain area, it shows. And we're going to have this back button. Now the back button is unique in the fact that if I make or zoom out and have a really distorted view and go to the next node, then the idea is when I click the back button, I get the same pan tilt field of view. Here we go. So that's what we're building as well. So this is all to do with variables and logic blocks. Okay, right. So with that said, let's go. So this is my project. I'm going to open it up. Just to let you know that it's already got 3 nodes into it. So let's go to properties. And yeah, so it's 3 nodes. I've linked them up. So if I just build the output and let's see what we've got to start with, you can see it's just basically a very plain 3-node project. Okay, so that's what we're going to be starting with. Okay, so the first thing on my list is going to be building the pop-up. All right, so with that, I'm going to open up the skin, and what I'm going to do now is add the button. So let's see if I've got my folder open, which I have. Here we go. Here's my button. I'm going to drag it into the skin, and there we go. So there's my button. Right, I'm going to give the button a more meaningful name. So let's call it button image. You will note as well that I've stolen Mr. Bledingfield's Thomas's mouse cursor thing, so it's easier to see my mouse. And when I type, you now see the keys that I'm typing in the top center of the screen. All right. The only thing that you really need to think about is that on the Mac, I would use the command key, and if I'm using the command key, you would be using the control key on the PC. So if I do, I don't know, command C to copy something, you would do control P. On the Mac, the option key, which is that one, is actually the alt key on the older Macs and on PC. So if you see me do something like option 1, then that's alt 1. All right, so with that said, let's carry on. So here's my button. So that's button image. I'm going to anchor that to the bottom of the skin canvas. I'm going to set the position, the X position, to 0. So that then puts it directly in the center of the canvas. And I'm going to have it 23 pixels up from the floor. Okay. Now I also want to change its size. It's a bit big at 130 pixels. So I'm going to make that 32 by 32 pixels. And that should be that. That's great. Right. Now with a button, what I want is a tooltip. So I'm going to grab the draw text box tool and just add my tooltip above the top of the button. I'm going to give it again a more meaningful name. So let's just call this button TT for button tooltip. And again, what I'm going to do is make it a child of the button. Okay. And then that allows me to top center it, so I can make sure that it's in the middle. So if I was to pull it to one side, you can see the figure goes to 25. If I set it to 0, it's now in the middle of the button. and let's just make it a nice rounded number of 30, minus 30 pixels up, because it's going to be minus 30 pixels from the top of the button to the top of the text box. Okay, so that's that. So what else am I going to do with this text box? Well, I want the background enabled because I want to see it. I'm going to change the background to black, and I'm going to change the text so it says show image. Okay, and I'm going to set the text color to white. All right then. Okay, so as I said, variables and logic blocks. So this is going to be our first logic block, because what we need to do with this text box is when I hover over the button, I'm going to want to show it, and when I mouse away from the button, I want it to hide. Now, in the good old bad old days, what we would have done is gone to the button and given it several actions. We would have given it a mouse enter, show button TT, mouse leave, hide button TT, and it got, you know, if you had a lot of buttons, it would take time. But with logic blocks, what I can now do is select the button, and under the alpha, I'm going to set the alpha to 0, so it's hidden. All right, I'm going to click this button here. Now this is our logic block by the symbol of an arrow going up or down, so true or false. All right, if that's what it means, but that's how I see it in my head, and I know it as a logic block, so that's cool. Right, so what I'm going to say is if we have a look at the trigger, I've got various things here, but the one that we're going to be looking at is the mouse. And we have mouse over, mouse down, mouse blah, 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 and several others. I'm actually going to use the mouse over parent. All right. Now, the reason for this, I can't use a mouse over because the button's hidden. So theoretically, I can't mouse over it. Okay. So if I do mouse over parent equals true, I can then say, bring the alpha up to 1. Okay. Now, because I'm using an alpha, I can have a transition, so a fade in time. So I'm going to select transition and set my fade in time to ½ a second. Okay, so if I click OK and open the skin preview, we should now see that happening. How cool is that? All right, so that was really, really simple. And the great thing about with logic blocks is it's looking at a condition. So unlike an action, I would have had to have had the action to say mouse enter to show something. Then I would have had to have an action to say mouse leave to hide it again. But with a logic block, it's looking at a condition. And the condition is if the mouse is over the parent, show it. So if my mouse isn't over the parent, it then fades back to 0. So it actually minimizes the amount of work you have to do. Right, okay, so that's pretty good. Right, so I want to add my pop-up. So let's give my pop-up a background. So I'm going to grab the rectangle tool or draw rectangle. I'm just going to make that 110 pixels wide by 160 pixels long. I know it's that size because I know what the images I'm going to be putting into it, but you know, hey ho. Right, so that's my rectangle. I'm going to call it it's image background. All right, so that's fairly good. I'm going to leave. What I'm going to do? No, I'm going to set it to anchor center, and we're going to set that to the center of the screen. So I just need to type in 0, 0. So we're 0 pixels either side from the center. All right. Okay, if I cursor down, I'm going to want the background to change to black to match my color scheme, but I'm going to change the alpha to 200, so it's not quite a solid. All right, I'm going to get rid of the border, don't want that. And I'm going to give it a radius of around about 20. I don't want it a circle or anything like that, just some nice round edges. Okay, so that's the background of my pop-up. So let's now grab an image. So let's go back to my folder, and it's going to be the pavilion. All right, so that's the image I want. So let's grab that. Now this is simple enough. I'm just going to name the image pav. All right, and I'm going to make this a child of the background image, which that means is to line it up, I just need to anchor it in the middle and set both positions for X and Y to 0. Bang, job done. All right, so that's now doing what I need it to do. Right, so I now have my pop-up image. I now have a button. So how do I control it? Well, again, what I could have done is in the good old bad old days is add more actions to this button. So not only to hide and show the tooltip, which we don't need to do anymore, I could have also hide and show the pop-up. But again, because we're going to be using variables, I'm going to add one. All right, so here's the variable, and I'm going to call this viz to start with. So viz, and I'm going to call it image. Now, with variable naming, I tend to, well, I've been listening to Thomas and Christoph for too long, so I've got it in my head that anything that's going to hide and show anything is a viz underscore whatever. A variable that's going to give me an option, I'll do op underscore whatever, you know, and anything that's a proper variable, it's going to be var underscore. It's just a naming convention. They're totally open. You can name variables to whatever you want. Right, so that's the name I've given to my variable, and I'm going to change its type to true and false. All right, so basically yes or no, see it or not, true and false. Okay, and the initial value I'm going to set to false because the initial value of my pop-up is I don't want to see it. Right, so that's basically my variable setup. So if I now go to the background, and what we're going to do with the background is set the background to alpha 0. Okay, and just as a quick look, you can see I've just got nothing there. Cool, because it's now alpha 0. But what I'm going to do is now add a logic block. And when you open a logic block, again, what you're seeing here is called an expression, all right? And you can have more than one. I could add another expression or another one. Let's delete those. So this is in my logic block, in my first expression, all right? So I'm trying to keep terminology. So if you guys, you know, ring in for help or you're emailing in for help and you start using terminology that we're not used to, it takes longer to help. But if you can then stick to terminology that we all know, then it makes support a lot easier. So in the logic block, we have an expression, and what I'm going to do is add a condition, all right? And the condition is going to be variable viz image, when that equals to true, set the alpha value to 1. And again, I'm going to enable a transition time of ½ second, just so it fades in and out. If I didn't enable a transition time, it would just hide and show. And if that's the case, I could have quite easily used a visible logic block, because a visible logic block doesn't have a transition, because making something visible or not is just hide or show it. There is no transition. Okay, so with that all done, let's put that there. Okay, so I've got this logic block and variable running. Now, what I tend to do, and you've probably seen me in other webinars, is I like to use text boxes that can read stuff as helpers. So I'm going to add a text box up here, and this is my helper. And what that is going to do is if I highlight the text and get rid of it, I'm going to use this insert placeholder button, and you can see it says variable, and there's the variable that we set. Okay, so now I know it looks codish, right? But basically what that's doing is that is the placeholder to read what's going on behind the scenes. So if I save this skin, because I haven't done that yet, so I really do need to do that in the project folder. So let's put skin. All right, so let's now do our first output and see what we've got. So here it says it's false and it's hidden, but we can't do anything with it yet because I haven't given the button any action. So the action for the button, now think about it, we've just set a variable, so the action for the button is going to be mouse click, set variable value. Okay, and we find our variable. If you've got many variables, you can select them from a list, but we've only got one for the second, and the operation is equals true. Now if we look at that and just back that up a bit, it's going to say, right, on mouse click I'm going to set a variable. Now the variable is my viz image, and I want it to equal to true. So on click, it will change it from false to true, and that's the end of it. I can't go any further. So let's just say close that and do that. Click. It's gone to true. I see that, but I can't do anything more. So what I need is a way of getting it back. Now under operation, we have several things here, and what we have is what we call the not. All right, now basically in a nutshell, if it's true, it's not false, make it false. If it's false, it's not true, make it true. So it's a toggle. So if you just get the mindset that not equals toggle, all right, so that's what that does. and click OK. If I now preview the skin, I can now not toggle. Okay, right, so why not? Let's have a look at that. So viz image equals, because I didn't do the not, right, and that should now, here we go. All right, cool. Right, so that's now toggling my variable, and you can see my little helper. Oh, I didn't point that out, did I? There's the helper up there. So, you know, if you've got something that's not working, you know, I'm using these text boxes as helpers, and when I'm finished doing what I'm doing, I will just then delete the little text box like so, because it's done, right? It's done its job. So I can now hide and show this image. Now my next task is I want to, let's just save this, and I'm going to use the keyboard to generate the output. So I'm going to use the Alt Command G for the Mac. Of course, that's going to be Control Alt Option or Alt for the PC. So there's my buttons. Overwrite the output. Yes, and here it is. Right. So this is the output. But what I want to do is when I click Show Image, I want it to be hidden until I get to, say, between these two pillar points here. So it's between this statue and this pillar. All right. So what I need to do is find out my pan angles to make that happen. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do that. You could go to user data, viewing parameters, and you can see that I could turn on, here's a new little button I've got, ready, boop, magnify. All right, so we can go to here and turn on the center line, and I can then more accurately go from there to there, and we can read the current pan angle. All right, but as you know me by now, I like my helper boxes, so I'm going to stick a text box in the corner, and I'm going to call that, or rather I'm going to give that the placeholder of position current pan angle. All right, so close, save, let's generate the output, and boom, we can see now that I've got my pan angles. All right, so that's good. Now I like to do this because I'm seeing the panorama for real. Okay, I'm not seeing it in the viewer or anything else that could be a slightly different size and distorting, you know, the shape and how much I can actually see. So I'm actually going to be looking at, say, well, let's just say 52 to 30. Let's do 52 to 30. So I want to see this at a pan angle of 52 and 30. Right, so before I forget this, I'm going to quickly add this in, which is view pan equals, I'm going to do 30, and then I'm going to add another condition of pan 52. Oh, sorry, 52. Okay, now I've only added it quickly because I've got a brain like a goldfish. If I don't hurry up and get the 30 and 52 in, I would have forgotten about it. So now we need to sort it out. So we're now saying that, right, when I'm panning at the angle of 30, I actually want to be able to see this when it is more than and equal than 30 and less than and equal to 52. Okay, so if we follow the logic, so if the button is turned on to see it in the first place, and I'm between these two pan angles, all right, then we should see it. Okay, so let's see this. So let's turn the button on to show my image, and as we whiz it around, bingo, there it is. Okay, now the thing is, my button is still saying show image. All right, so it's not really giving me any hint that I'm in show image mode or not, because if I turn it off, I don't see it. So have I broken it? Have I done something wrong, or is it working? I just haven't pressed the button. I don't know. So what we can do is go back to the tooltip. There we go. Because now that we've got a variable that's running in the background, what I can do is say that when the variable visimage equals true, I want to change the text to hide image. Okay, so let's just save that. Have a look in real life what's actually going on. So here is show the image, and when I click it, it's hide image. So I now have some visual representation. The mere fact it's now saying hide image is that I would expect to see it when I'm panning around. Okay, cool. Right, this is all well and good, but there is an issue. All right, and the issue is the logic in this is to show the image at a certain pan angle. Now if I was to change nodes and zoom this round to the same pan angles, I see this image, but now in totally the wrong panorama. Okay, so how do we fix that? Well, this is again not a difficult task. What I'm going to go to is the user data, come down, and I'm going to give this, now this is the pavilion, so I'm going to give it a tag of pav. All right, keep it small and simple. Open up the skin, and I'm going to add to the logic block. I'm going to say that when it's Tour Pro, because this is Panorama 2 VR Pro, when the tag contains pav. All right, now I'm going to bring that up because I like to keep things in order. So I know we're building up a logic block here, but again, let's start from top to bottom because logic blocks work that way. They start from the top and work down. So if I've selected I want to see the image in the first place, that's true, and my tag contains pav, and I am between 30 and 52 on my pan angles, then I will see this image. All right, so let's close this. Publish. So turn it on. Bang. I now see my image. All right. Now that's, we'll say 41, and as we said, what, 32 and say 50. Right. Okay. So let's go to the next node, spin it around, and we won't see this because this node doesn't have the tag pav. Right. Okay. So that's done. What I want to do next then is add another image. All right, and I want to add it for node 3, which is going to be showing Johann Strauss. I want to show a nice little pop-up image of Johann. Right, so to make life easier for myself, I'm going to deselect the visible in the skin only for the image. I'm going to grab from here Mr. Strauss. There he is. There we go. And do the same thing. I'm just going to let's just call this what do we call him? JOH, nice and short. Again, I'm going to make him a child of the background rectangle. So if I anchor him center, all I have to do is set the position points to 0, 0, and he's anchored in the center. Okay, right. Now what we need to do is find out what pan angles I need to show Mr. Strauss. Okay, so let's close this, save. Let's just publish and go back to the tour, go back to node 3. And look here, so there's Mr. Strauss. So I'm going to really want this to show roughly between, I don't know, minus 80 and minus 48. So minus 48, minus 80. So before I forget then, so let's add these quickly. So I'm going to go to the logic block, and I'm going to add a second expression, all right, for the background, and then we're going to say just for the view pan, I'm just going to put that into minus 48, add another condition, so view pan minus 80. So I'm clicking away here, so I've only put those in there so I don't forget, but now what we need to do is set this up pretty much as we set up the top one. Now what I could have done, in all fairness, all right, is come to this and just copied it. So actually let's do that because that would make more sense. So if I just copy this logic block, all right, come out, I think we can come back in and paste, and there it is. All right, so this is exactly the same, but now what I want to do is affect the different angles. So what I want to say is that if it's equal to and more than minus 48, more than minus 80, all right, because don't forget we're on minuses, so we need to go higher. So for minus 80, that's further away from 0, and here is going to be minus 48. Okay, right, so that's my two angles to make the background show. Now, the viz image thing, that's fine, that's not a problem. But the tag, pav, that's, do we really need the tags? Not if we're going to go for two images. All right, so let's just think about this. Okay, so I'm just going to save this because I want to get back to the project file. Now, I've got, in the pavilion, I've got a tag called pav, and in the Johann Strauss, I'm just going to put the tag John. All right, so on both panoramas, I want to see the background, but I only want to see the image in their respective panoramas. Right, so let's have a think about this. Right, so go to the background. All right, and the background is saying that only show this if it's pav. Don't want to do that. Only show this if the tag is that. So this is what I want it to do. All right, I only want to show the background when I'm in a particular node. And hang on, I'm losing myself here. When I'm in a particular node and actually, so yes, let's go back. Sorry, I do need to do that. So let's just go to tags contain. This one is going to be JOH, and I'm just going to copy that, and that's going to paste, and that is going to be PAV. Right, so at PAV we will see the background at this particular pan angle, and in the Johann Strauss panorama we will see the background in this pan angle. Right, so let's just see this. I'm not worried about the images just yet. I'm more concerned about the backgrounds. So I'm seeing the backgrounds between those two. Right, if I spin it around, I shan't see it anywhere here other than between these two. So that's working exactly how I want to see it. But the only thing I've got to do now is show whichever image I want. Now again, I can use the tag for that. So if I go to the Johann Strauss image, I can set the alpha to 0, and I can say that if the tour tag equals or contains John, all right, I want it to show. And again, I'm going to want to transition to fade that in so it fades in with the background. Okay. And then what we could have done as well is just copied that, gone to the pav, again do the same thing under the alpha, set that to 0, paste in the logic block, or the condition into the logic block, and I'm just going to change that to pav. All right. So that's that, and it's already set because I copied it. The fade and the alpha is already done. So theoretically then, that should be everything working as is. So show the image. As I spin round, I only see the pavilion because of the tag is telling me only to show this image, but the logic block is saying show this background at this point only in this image. When I go to the next image and we turn the image back on, as we go around, we'll only see Johann Strauss because this is the only image that's got JOH as the tag, and that is when it's going to show. So here, that's how basically we can control when the pop-ups happen and at what pan angles and what pop-ups we're going to see. Okay, all right, so with that all done, all right, let's just have a quick look back at this. So in the images, there should be just one logic block under the alpha, just to show it in its particular panorama. So that's both of those images. The background is the one which has got all the work done to it. Now, the only reason why there's lots of work here is because I'm trying to show you logic blocks and variables. Theoretically, you could have had your own image with, or each image could have had its own background. So here I'm trying to use the same background for both images. As I say, this is a show and tell, if you like, on logic blocks and variables. That's why this is getting complicated. I say complicated, it's not if you break it down. All right. So just one quick recap then. So make sure that the logic block is set to true so I can see the image. between two pan values, and then we got the pav as long as the tag contains the correct tag, then it will show. All right, okay, I think that's it for the pop-up. All right, so I'm just going to minimize all of those, and what we're going to do now is I'm going to get rid of this text box, and I'm now going to look at the animated hotspot. Okay, so I'm just going to hide all these in the skin as well, because that gives me a blank canvas to work with. Okay, so animated hotspot. How do we build this? Well, I normally build these out of the rectangle, so draw rectangle. So I'm going to add a rectangle, and I am going to set this to 32 by 32 pixels. All right, I am going to change its color to, no, I'm going to leave it at white, and just going to get rid of the border. I'm going to give it the hand cursor, so when we roll over it, we get the cursor changed to a hand symbol to show the viewer that it's interactive. And I'm going to set the radius to 999 pixels from the center, making it a circle. All right, so that's my little round circle. So that's going to be the hotspot. When we look at it in the live view, because the live view's got a grayish background, it makes it easier to spot. Okay, so that's the circle. Now I'm just going to give it a more meaningful name. So let's just call it hotspot image. And what I'm going to do is use the keyboard to copy this and paste it. And I'm going to give it another name, or change the name to hotspot ring. Okay, now the hotspot ring, that needs a little bit of modification, because let's just hide the hotspot image itself. So the hotspot ring, I want to get rid of the center mark, and I want to add a border width of 2 pixels, and I'm going to change that to white as well. Okay, now the thing is, when you're adding borders to rectangles, you're actually changing the size of it. So a rectangle would be, this example is it's 32 pixels. If I add 2 pixel border, I'm actually making it bigger by 1 pixel the way around. Now you can see that if I was to do this, you can see this ring here. Let's do my magnifying. Here we go. I don't know if you can see that, but anyway, there's a white ring there. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to make the hotspot ring a child of my image. I'm going to anchor it in the center and make sure that we've got it set to perfectly in the middle. Okay, and because the border itself adds size to it, I'm going to just actually make a little bit smaller. So let's just take it down to say 30 pixels to make it smaller. Okay, all right. Now, so that's my hotspot. That's how, you know, the basic bones of the imagery is concerned. So that's my images. How to make this work? Right, well, I'm going to use another variable. So under variables, I am going to say var, because it's a variable, and it's going to be hotspot, so HS. And I'm going to leave it as a number. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I want this number to increase, and the way I'm going to do that is to add a timer. All right, so the timer I can just put anywhere I like. So let's just put 0, 0, so it's up in the corner. Timers automatically come with a visible logic block, because the idea is that you can wrap them around something. When the timeout ends, it hides. I'm not using it for this purpose, so to keep things neat, I'm going to open up the logic block and just delete it. Didn't have to do that. You could ignore it, but that's what I like to do. All right, the other thing is under the timer's properties, because you'll probably start to see a little bit of a repetition here with our elements. So when I added a rectangle, I had the ID, position, size. You start to replicate. But when you get to a element's unique properties, it will have its own tab. So here, this tab is timer. So the type is going to be, I could have images ready. I'm going to go for start. So as soon as it starts up, it starts working. All right. The timeout, 5 seconds. So whatever happens, it happens in 5 seconds. And do I have it repeat? Yes, I do, because I want it to keep on going. So going round. All right. Now, the thing to remember with times and timeouts is that a timer has 2 states. It's either active or deactive, all right? And so if I wanted something to activate twice within a second, all right, I wouldn't have the timeout to a second, because what will happen is it becomes active, waits a second, then goes to deactive, waits a second, then goes to active. So between two active points would actually be 2 seconds, right? So what you would do is you would say, right, if I want something to be happening in 2 active points in a second's interval, I would half that time, all right? Now, of course, what we could do is have an active and deactivate, so therefore that would work in that, but that's not how my brain works, all right? So just bear with me on that one. Okay, so with this happening then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the action of, all right, activate. So every time the timer is active, I want it to, strangely enough, set a variable value, but this time round it's going to the variable var hs. All right, so that's the variable I want to affect. All right, as I said, now that I've got more than one, I can select them. Now, because this is a counter one, it's a numbered variable, I've got more operation. So as a sneak peek, if we go back to the image one, which was a true false, I only have 4 operations. All right, but now that we're talking about a numbered one, I've got more to play with. But in this case, all I want to do is just add, and I want to add 1 to my variable. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Click OK. Now I'm going to do as I normally do, and that's add my little helper text box. So there's my text box. I'm just going to delete the text, and I'm going to use this insert placeholder button, and I'm going to say the variable var hs, so variable for the hotspot, and it's going to display its contents. All right, so if I click open, you'll see that it's now showing me counting. All right, because that's exactly what I've asked it to do. So I've got a variable var hs, the number is 0. The timer is set that every time it becomes active, it's going to add 1 to it, and the timer's set up to repeat every half a second. Okay, so every second this is going to count up. All right, so that's what's happening. Cool. Now that's just going to keep on counting and counting and counting and not stop. All right, so I want it to actually loop back. So what I'm going to do is go back to the counter or the timer, and I'm going to give it another action of activate. We are going to set variable value, and it's for the variable for the hotspot, and I'm going to set this one mod brackets percentage. Now I believe it's modulo, and basically it's a circular calculation. Technically terms, it's a loop. All right, between you and me, it's a loop. So what I'm asking it to do now is when it reaches a certain number is to loop back to 0. Okay, so what I'm going to say is here is the number. I'm going to put 4 in there. Okay, now what we're going to see is to try and make this as easy as possible is I've got 4 digits. All right, so 0 to 3. When it hits 4, it throws it back to 0. All right, so 0 to 3 is 4 thingies, 4 digits, 4 numbers. But when you're actually dealing with the logic block, you just think to yourself that on number 4 at that point I want it to go back to 0. So when we hit 4, it shows 0. So this is exactly what I'm seeing. So you can see this counting, and this is now going to be looping forever. Okay, which is exactly what I want. Okay, so with that said, I am going to go to my hotspot image. All right, and I'm going to go to the scaling. Here it is, and I am going to say that when the variable var hs equals 1, all right, I'm going to reduce its size to 0.8. Okay, now if we have a quick look at this, you'll see that it's just going to flicker, bop, and back it in. All right, so when it gets to 1, it reduces in size. As it goes away from 1, because it's a logic block depending on a state, so whilst it's at 1, it's reduced. As soon as it's away from 1, it goes back to its original setting. All right, so now what I'd like to do is actually give that a bit of a transition. So I'm going to give it a transition time of about half a second. You can use any values you like, but as long as you keep them fairly constant. All right, so within this project I'm using ½ a second. Now the other thing is as well is I don't like is that the timer's not running fast enough for me. I'd like this to see this happen a bit quicker. So if 0.5 is going to give me 1 second intervals, if I want ½ second intervals, I need to type in 0.25. So 2/4 make a half. Okay, so if we now look at this, we'll see the timer runs a bit quicker, and we're now getting this pulse. Now, one of the things I've seen with hotspots is you get this round hotspot and some rings just come out of them. Yeah, that looks a bit pants. What I like is it to shrink down and pulse out, and then the rings explode from it. Okay, so this is it reducing in size to pulse up. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to now select my ring. Okay, go to scaling, and this time round what I'm going to do is say when the variable value of var hs equals 2, all right, I want it to scale to twice its size. So let's just go for 2, and again my magical number, as I say, try and keep it a constant. So if you choose 1 second, then it's 1 second throughout building this, or if it's ½ a second, because I want it to see it happen fairly quickly, so stick with ½ a second throughout. Okay, so now what we should have is that. Pretty cool. But we have obviously some obvious flaws with this, and the flaws are I can see the rings and I want them to fade out. So what I can do is on the hotspot ring we can now go to the alpha, all right, and I can say that when the variable var hs equals 2, fade it out to 0 over ½ a second. All right, okay, so click OK, and let's see what that does and how far does that get us. Ooh, getting closer, but I'm seeing the rings coming back again. Alrighty, how do we solve that one? Well, if we go back to the alpha, what I'm going to do is right button click, copy, right button click, paste, and I'm going to say 3. So basically what this logic block, or what this expression is saying, is it has the two conditions that if the var equals 2 and 3, right? Now, before Thomas jumps in and starts having a go, this is on purpose, all right? So calm down. If I click OK and have a look at this, we'll see that it's broke. Oh dear, what's going on? Right, now the reason it's broke is because with the alpha, you can't have 2 and 3 at the same time, because this is what it's saying is if the variable is at 2 and 3, do this, it fade it out. Well, you can't be at 2 numbers at the same time, so this operation has to be an OR. So when I'm at 2 or 3, keep it at 0. All right, so with that said, boom, and there's a hotspot. Now, I don't know if you can see that. I will try my little zoom feature. Let's have a look. But you'll see that there is... Okay, that's not working. Doesn't emanate it. Forget that. It doesn't move, right? But basically what's happening is there is a slight blur to the edges before it pulses. And that's because I didn't make the ring small enough. So if we take that down to 28. So what I'm going to do is click this button, which is lock aspect ratio. Take that down to, say, 28. And now let's have a look at it. We shouldn't see any blurring going out from the edge. That was it. It was the mere fact that when the ring became visible, it was slightly bigger, and it made the circle that little bit bigger, which gave it a blurry effect, which I didn't like. So now we have my hotspot behaving the way I want. Okay, cool. Right. So what we're going to do then is, to finish this off and make it a hotspot, I'm going to grab this element here. This is an add hotspot template. Click it in the skin. I'm going to give it the actions that we give all hotspots, which is mouse click, open next panorama. I'm going to want it to open the hotspot URL. So it's, and the view I always choose target view. Now this is the view you would set if you would set in a target, so you see what view you want when you get to the other side. If you don't set this in the template, you can do as you can set them in the hotspot editor and it won't work until this is set. But if you do this, then you're job done. You don't have to do it again. Then all I've got to do is just give it a more useful name. Now I'm going to use our normal naming convention, which is ht_node, and I am going to make this hotspot image a child of that, set its center anchoring, and then just do 0, 0 to align it to the hotspot template. There we go. And I can then collapse the tree, and when we publish, we should have my hotspot. There it is. And when we click it, we can go around. There we go. Now, the only thing I'd like to do with this is, again, we're looking at a bit more logic, and that is, if I select the hotspot, I want to change its color. So I can say that when I mouse over it, yeah, I'm going to change its color to black. Boom, done. Now the hotspot ring, all right, because it's not visible, I can't do the same thing. All right, if I select it and go to the color, we need to go to the color of the border. Almost the same thing when I mouse over parent. There we go. Because when we mouse over the image, which is the parent of this, then it can change to black. So that's what we're going to do. So when we mouse over parent, we're going to set that to black. Okay, and that should give me the effect I want. All right, there we go. So that's my hotspot. Alrighty then. So let's go back to the skin, find my helper box and delete it, and we're good to go. Right, my last little trick. Now I'm saving this to last because it's quite good fun, and that's the back button. All right, so I'm just going to draw a text box. I'm going to anchor it bottom left hand corner to 10 by 10 pixels. It's going to be a button, so I'm going to give it a hand cursor. Let's give it a meaningful name of button back. All right, and what we're going to do with this is get rid of the border and change its color to black, and then give it a name of back. That's going to be the, oh sorry, let's do that again. That's going to be the name on the button. Before I can see it, I need to change the text to white. Okay, so that's my back button. Now, as back buttons go, all right, this is really, really simple to set up, because all I would do is go mouse click, all right, open next panorama, and I would go last node visited. Now we have 2 here, and as a quick explanation, this is the last node visited. So if I'm in this tree, I've got 3 nodes. If I go nodes 1, 2, and at 3, if I click last node visited, I go from 3 back to 1. Because I came from 3, if I now click last node visited, I go back to 3. Because I came from 2, if I click it again, I go back to 2. All right, that's how that works. Go back 1 node does exactly that. If I start off going 1, 2, 3, if I click the go back 1 node, I go back to 2. If I click go back 1 node, well, going back from 2 would be back to 1. So this is like your history back. This is going back just 1 node, and that's what I'm selecting. All right, I'm going to use the default view for the minute, but we will be changing that. So let's just have a look at this and see where we are with this. So I'm in this node, go to that button, or go to this node, click the back button, and we're back. It's as easy as that, as creating one. But what I want to do is I want to be able to save the pan tilt field of view, or the pan tilt and zoom, if you like, of this node when I go to the other one. So when I come back, I'm viewing what I was viewing. Now the way we do this is a little bit more complicated, but not so. I'm going to call this var underscore p for pan. All right. I'm going to add another one, var underscore t for tilt, and var underscore f for field of view. I'm going to, now they're all set to numbers anyway, so that's fine. So I've got pan, tilt, field of view. Is that a capital P? No, it should be a little p. Right, okay. So that's my 3 variables that I've got. Okay. So what I want to do in my back button is I want to record my pan, tilt, field of view before I change the node. All right. So lucky enough, we have a before node changed action. All right. I am going to set the variable value, right, for the pan, and this is where we need to click our expert mode, right? And when we do this, this will also explain something else. When we do this, I want to type in a placeholder, and the placeholder I'm going to be using is $brackets AP. So grab the angle pan. All right. Okay. Now, as we all know, I like my little helpers. So here is a text box. All right. And if I get rid of that, you can see that if I go to add placeholder and position, if I want to see the pan angle, there is my placeholder. So that's exactly what I've just put into that button. All right. So if we go back to this, I've actually put in, so before node change, set the variable value to the variable varp, so for pan. I know the operation changes to a number when we go to expert mode, but hey ho, it is what it is. And then the value is $AP. That's what I want. Okay. So the next value I want then is going to be, let's go to my helper, is going to be for the tilt. Now, as a bit of a reference here, as a bit of a helper, shall I say, is if we look at the properties for a hotspot and click on it, you'll see the target, because this is what we're basically doing, is grabbing this target from one pano and storing it in a variable, so when we come back to it we can retrieve it. Now if you look, it's probably not a good example actually because it's too many digits here, but you can see that the pan, tilt and field of view are separated by forward slashes. So this is what we've got to sort of replicate as well. All right, so if we go back to my skin and go back to my helper text box, I'm going to add a forward slash and go position AT. So that's now our AT. And if I actually, whilst I'm here, if I do the same thing again now, I can add position AF for current field of view. So this is basically my sort of logic that I'm looking at, and this is what I need to grab, right? So if I go to this button again, we've already set, before node change, set the variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right button click and copy, and I'm going to paste this a couple of times. Okay, so we go to the next one. We can say I want the, that was the var for pan, this is tilt, so I need to change that to $AT. All right, now I know it sounds like coding and everything else, no, I'm not a programmer, but it's here, it's written for you. If you know how to get to the information, it is all laid out for you. All right, so that's what we're doing there, and we're going to open up the last one, and we want the T, so var T for sorry, not T, F for field of view, and we need to set that to AF. Okay, all right, so what should happen now, all things being equal, if I save this, you'll see that when I move this around, all of this data is being collected. So if I zoom in and out, we see the zoom. If I tilt up and down, we see the tilt. And if I move around, we've got the pan. All right. So I'm now got the data of where I am. All right. And what I'm going to do is add another text box helper, because this is the one that's showing me where I am. But this one is going to be showing me, let's have a look, of the data actually in the variables. Actually forget that, because we've already done it. All right, forget that. So I'm going ahead of myself. So that's the data in the variables. So basically what I want to do is put this in my button, because what we've actually got is the action that when we mouse click, open next panorama, visited last visited node. But what we need to add now is the view. So if I now click expert mode, you can now see that it says pan, tilt, field of view. All right. So what I'm going to do is select this text box to make life easier for myself, and I'm going to copy that, because all of that is all the required data I need for this button. All right. So let's go into here. So last visited, and the pan tilt field of view should be no, right, okay, right, what have I done? Right, okay, yes. What I've done here is my text box, I've messed up on my text box. Right, okay, what I should have done here, do apologise, sorry, that was correct in seeing the live pan tilt of view, but what we need to see is the data stored in the variables. So what I should have done was gone variables, right, there's my pan / variable tilt / and this next one would be the F field of view. All right, so these are the variable values, right? Okay, yeah, so I do apologize again, doesn't matter how much practice you do, you'll still have problems. Right, okay, so basically if I go to a different node, we see that was the data stored to the variables. If I go to another one, that's the data stored for those variables. So to make this work in my back button then is do what I say, is click this text box. We're going to copy this text, all right, in the back button, and that is going to be the target. So if I set the expert mode and we just paste that in, all right. So here we're picking up the pan tilt field of view that's stored in the variable before we change the node. Okay, so let's just do that. Have a look. All things being equal, is this. If I move that position up there so the hotspot's in the corner and click to go to my next node, I've stored this into the variable. I'm using it as a temporary storage. So when I click the back button, it's coming back showing me the same angle. Right, okay, right. Now obviously this will work if I was to move that there, click that node, and then move that out into that corner, then basically the back button will take me down to there, and because it's a back from last node, it would take me back to there. Okay, so just to finish off and tidy this up, I would then remove that text box. I'm sorry if I confused on that last bit, got myself a little bit confused. I wish that because the text box helper, I was trying to show the variable status, so the var, p, t and f, but I was actually showing, I was using the placeholders to show the real-time angle, pan, tilt and view, where I needed in the end to show what the variables were set at. But once we knew that, we would just copy and paste into the button and we're done. Right, well, I think that's about it. That was, well, it's a bit longer than I wanted really, but I was hoping it was going to be a bit quicker. But yeah, that's an hour gone. I think that's all done. Karen, do we have any questions?
Hi. Yeah, we have a few questions, of course. And if
Go on then, shoot.
No, it's actually just a few. Maybe everyone is still buzzing in their heads right now from this. So.
Well, I'm hoping it wasn't too bad. I mean, you know, it's. I know things can start to rack up a bit when you're looking at a load of conditions in an expression, but they do make sense when you talk it through. So.
Yeah, and it helped today to watch this. So, let's see. We're going to start with Thomas's question, and he's asking, which I wanted to get this over and done with because we do get this question a lot. When do you use alpha over visible or vice versa? So when do you use alpha and when do you use visible? How do you know when to use either one of those?
Well, Alpha is if you just want to hide and show something, you know. They're good for tooltips, to be honest, because as you hover over something, you want it to be seen straight away. So that's when I would use it. If I was to use an alpha, I would use it if I wanted to fade something in, because you can't fade in a visible yes or no, yeah. But you can fade in an alpha. So, and that's also true for the actions. If you go to the so mouse click alpha, change element alpha, you've actually got a duration of change as well as the alpha that you wish to, you know, get to. But also in this case you may not want to go to a full solid. Again, a visible is either yes or no, but a button can also be changed to change the alpha from one value to another. So you could make one button not quite so solid, and then, you know, each button press could fade it out that wee bit more. So yeah, it's basically your use case. Mostly speaking, you know, if you want that nice half-second functions where it fades in, then it's always going to be an alpha. If you're happy for it to come in and out very quickly, then it's a visible. But other than that, they do similar things.
Cool. Okay. The next question we'll ask is coming from Sebastian. And he's asking, are you planning to add a choice of pan value of positive number, negative number from the current view rather than absolute pan angles in a future release of Pen 2 VR? Because setting absolute pan angles for a lot of hotspots with callouts and whatnot is really time consuming.
Right, well, we got this covered in version 7, or the next major release. Now, the mere fact we're still tinkering about with version 6, I am not going to put a date on this. I'm not that brave. But in version 7, we have a way of, it's for a hotspot, and we can just do a percentage of one side and a percentage of another, and then it will light up in the middle. So it's not even using pan angles, it's more of a percentage of however the screen width. So, you know, we have a solution for this. I understand where it's coming from. You know, I'm sort of regretting making those call outs now. I made a call out ages ago that everybody loved, and then everybody jumped on it and was making their own fancy ones, which is great. Really, you know, really want people to do this, and I was just really glad that my simple little project inspired a lot. But I do understand in this project, because we're not using a hotspot, we do need to know the pan angles. But there's nothing stopping us. Again, in version 7, you could actually add a hotspot and just use that to trigger it as it whizzes around the panorama. So, you know, there is ways and means. We do have solutions on the way, is all I can say at the moment.
We're always improving. We're always adding new things to make your life easier. So,
yeah. But
you know,
sadly not mine. Mine's not getting any easier. But go on. Next.
Let's see. Ink for the first name. We've seen you on a few webinars already. He's asking, can't you use one variable to store the pan, tilt, and field of view in a single variable as a string? So you can add it just in one variable.
Probably as a text.
Yeah, as a text. Probably.
So as a text, I'm sure you can actually, and I think I've seen this done, or done it myself, or seen Thomas do it, or I am aware that it probably could be done. I tend to just have variables, but yeah, I would say yes, you can. It's just in these early stages of learning variables and logic blocks, don't want to blow brains too much. I mean, that last one with the button for remembering, you know, was a little bit of a head cracker in the fact that the actual data became quite long. You had 3 lots of variable placeholders in one action, so it did start to look a bit confusing. This is why I like to use those helper text boxes, because I was adding that, had I was using the right one, of course, I was adding it one section at a time. So it would have been the variable for the pan, then the /, then the variable for the, you know, the tilt, and that would have been really nice to say, look how easy it is to get this by using the insert placeholder button. Then all you have to do is copy and paste it in and job done. had I have chosen the right one, that's as easy as it would have been. I mean, obviously I went back and fixed it, but yeah. Anyway, moving on. I digress.
I think that's it for the questions, but I wanted to ask you, are you planning to put this project available for everybody
Yeah.
as you have in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be, and I'm going to be building on this as well. This is going to be the backbone to some more, throwing some more logic blocks and some other bits and pieces to it. I'm just going to be building on this. So each time we'll be adding some more to the same project. So hopefully, well, I say hopefully, but basically what will happen is after part 1, you'll get this. Part 2 will be, this with more bolt-ons. And then you can be able to separate them. I'm trying to clearly separate the items I'm doing because it makes it easier for the recordings and putting time indexing, time indexes in, because at time index 0 to this we're covering that, etc., etc. So trying to make it as clear as possible, but but I'm also trying to make it as softly a gentle in to logic blocks and variables.
Yeah, okay, cool. Because and you can just a reminder, we are recording this, and everyone, you can go back and watch the video again and even work on the project along with Martin when you have the project in your hand. So I think that's also nice to go back and really grasp these concepts.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think we just had one more question come in from Walter, and then I think we'll close this up. He's asking if we have examples for logic blocks and variables actions in the forum.
There are several projects in the forum that use logic blocks. If you look at some of the components, generally speaking with components, when I add a component to the forum, I tend to describe how it functions. So it gives you I'll say that I've added this variable and this is what it's doing and things like that. But yeah, there are examples in there. But hopefully, as these webinars build up, there'll be more examples here. But there's also, obviously there's going to be documentation covering all this. So yeah, there's going to be plenty of resources to look at. But I would definitely say check out the components, because the components do use lots of variables and logic blocks, on the understanding that those that are not interested in it can just add the component to their skin and just use it. But those people that are interested in it, I tend to add this is the component, how to add it, this is what it does. Then underneath that is, if you want to lift the hood up, this is how it works. And it's that bit that you can read and get into.
Yeah, and I think, we don't have a repository of examples. There are a few examples in the documentation.
Yep.
And for me personally, I always go into the components and see what's been done there and how they're functioning. They're great for learning how those logic blocks are being used. So yeah, if you need examples, they're right there in the skin, in the Silhouette and Simplex V6 skins.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's it for questions.
Cool. Right. Well, I'll just say thank you everybody for taking part. I hope it wasn't too heavy. I did try to be gentle. I could have been more gentle, but it's a fine seesaw balancing act for those that have already been playing with the software and those new to it. So I'm hoping everybody got something out of it. But until next time, I'm going to sign off and say ta-da, and I'll just leave it over to you, Karen.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and keep a lookout for the recorded video, and we'll hopefully see you next week. Don't forget there's a part 2, so come back next week, or at least register so you get a notification that there's a video. So
absolutely.
Yeah, good night everybody. Enjoy your day if you're just starting, and
enjoy your evening if you're not.
Yeah.
All right, cheers then. Bye.
Bye.